I wanted to say just a few words about apocryphal sources. I have in a few of these videos referenced the book of Jasher, and I will probably reference it again. It's really the only apocryphal source I have personally read. I did enjoy it. There's a few things we need to note. First of all, the Apocrypha, the classic Apocrypha, was a collection of books that was included in the canon back in the day, like in the Nicene Creed, it was included. It was kind of included as a secondary books. They weren't quite as good as the other ones. And the reason for it is that their authorship couldn't be fully proven. So the main canon was these ones we know these were written by prophets. The Apocrypha are ones that we think were written by prophets, and they're pretty good, but we're not quite sure. So we're going to put them in the Apocrypha. That's what the Apocrypha was. And when Joseph Smith was translating the Bible, he asked about the Apocrypha because it was a common source back then. But God told him not to bother because there was just too much. There was some good stuff there, but there was a whole lot of stuff that wasn't inspired, wasn't scripture. And so God said, don't bother with it. But if people want to read it, they can go ahead and read it, and they can get some good stuff out of it if they read it with the Spirit. So I would like to offer 3 general guidelines on how to judge apocryphal sources. Now, the standard works, these are scripture. I mean, the only book in the standard works that is not scripture is the Song of Solomon, which Joseph Smith declared to be uninspired. So, but everything else is inspired scripture. This is our standard of doctrine. So, how do we judge the Apocrypha? Mainly, we judge it by the standard. The standard works. So here are our 3 points. First, if something in the Apocrypha agrees with the standard works, we accept it because we already know it's true. So for instance, the creation. The creation is described in the book of Jasher almost the exact same way as it is in the book of Genesis. Okay, we can accept that. It's the same thing. Then there are those things that are not directly confirmed in the Bible, but do not contradict the Bible either. And in general, I say we can probably accept these. And these are things like what I said with, in the days of Peleg was the earth divided, and his brother was Joktan, for in his days was the life of man reduced. I can't remember the exact wording, but it was something like that. Now, there's nothing in the Bible to contradict that. And as I pointed out in my video, you can see how the ages of men at the time of Peleg and his brother Joktan drop off precipitously, almost cut in half from what they are before. So it is kind of confirmed. It's not directly confirmed, but it also doesn't contradict. It is something that we can accept. Another one that I do kind of like, I'm a little more hesitant to accept it because it has no, see, with Joktan, there's at least some evidence in the Bible that it's true. This one, there's no evidence in the Bible that it's true. And there's no statement by any prophet in the modern day that I know of. But, according to the book of Jasher, before the flood, one of the great evils of the day was that women, in order to maintain their young, youthful, girly figures, would take a drug that would make them infertile. It would prevent pregnancy. And this is one of the great evils that the book of Jasher says was going on before the flood. And I do think it has some merit to it, not as good as the one about Joktan and the reduction of lifespans, but you'll note that in the book of Genesis and in the book of Moses, Noah's sons aren't born until he's like 500 years old. I think he was 450 when his oldest son was born. There's no indication in Genesis that he had any children before that. Now, the book of Jasher tells us that women at the time were taking this drug to prevent having children. And it states that Noah's wife did also take the drug, taking part in this cultural thing. But she married Noah. She kind of repents. She marries Noah. She joins him. and Noah prays to God, and God reverses the effect of the drug, allowing her to have children. Is that true? That's what, as I say, I'm a little hesitant about it. It does kind of explain why Noah didn't have any children until he was 450. But it's not. It's one that I'm a little hesitant on. But again, it's not contradicted by anything in the scriptures. It's just not confirmed either. And so you want to be a little cautious on these. But then we have our third category, and this is what I really like. And that is, well, the two things that you reject. Okay, I know I said three, but I think I actually have to put it as four. There's two things you can accept: those that are confirmed, and those that are not confirmed but are not contradicted. On the other hand, you have those things that are directly contradicted, and that is like the story of Lamach murdering Irad in the Book of Moses. We know Lamach murdered his great grandfather to protect the oath of the secret covenant. In the book of Jasher, we are told that Lamach killed his grandson, or his son, I think it was Tubal-Cain that he killed, because Tubal-Cain killed Cain. It's all a convoluted story. So Tubal-Cain, according to the story, they see Cain at a distance, and he looks like a wild beast, and so Tubal-Cain shoots him with an arrow. And when they get up close enough, they see that they actually killed Cain. And so Lamach, to fulfill God's declaration that whoever killed Cain would be cursed 7 times and all that. So to fulfill that, Lamach turns around and murders his son. And this is when Lamach is an old man with bad eyesight and everything. It's all a convoluted story. But we know that wasn't true. That's not the murder that Lamach is talking about in the book of Genesis. Even though the book of Jasher tells us that story, we can say no, that story is not true because it's a direct contradiction of what we read in the book of Moses. The second way we know that something is wrong is when the story is absolutely ridiculous. And again, in the book of Jasher, let me give you a couple of examples. There's one part where the Israelites, they come out of Egypt and they're going through the land of the Canaanites. And I think that they went through the land of the Amorites. They just destroyed two kingdoms. And this other guy decides he doesn't want to have his armies destroyed by the Israelites. So he's going to go out and destroy the Israelite army all by himself. And he goes out and he picks up a rock that is, the translation is a little bit fuzzy. But as best guess, it's a rock that's supposed to be 3 miles long. And he picks up this rock and he's just going to throw it and smush the entire company of Israel with this 3-mile boulder. But he lifts it up and God blasts him with a lightning bolt and he drops the rock on himself, killing himself. And that's just ridiculous. It's too ridiculous to be believable. Later on, or earlier on, we have the 12 sons of Jacob. And you may be familiar with the story of Shechem, where Shechem sleeps with their sister, but then he wants to get married to her, and they'll agree to be circumcised and while they're still sore from being circumcised, Levi and Simeon go in and destroy the city. Well, Jasher gives us a little bit more detail and then states that all the surrounding cities come to attack Jacob and his family, which that may be true. But in these fights, you have Jacob's sons, like 3 of them, go to a city and sack the city, which I doubt they went by themselves. Well, they don't go by themselves. They go to the small army, but they don't just go into the city. They go and they leap over a wall that's 16 feet high. Sometimes they leap onto the wall. Sometimes they leap over the wall. I was like, maybe there was a war, but these details of leaping 16 feet, I have to question that. That probably didn't happen. And then my favorite one. And I got to go back and reread this one because I might be misremembering it just a little bit. But this is the way I remember it, okay? Is that when Joseph kind of frames Benjamin, before Judah offers himself in Benjamin's place, Judah attempts to intimidate Joseph threatening to bring his, I'm going to go back and get all my father's armies. We're going to come and we're going to lay waste to the entire kingdom of Egypt. And Joseph retorts, oh, that's okay. We'll just come up and wipe out all of the land of Canaan then. And it kind of goes back and forth. And then Judah, to prove his own personal strength, sits on a rock and grinds it to powder with his butt. I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry. That didn't happen. Makes for a good story, but it didn't happen. But again, in that story, there is something that I think did likely happen. That is when the brothers come to Egypt the first time to buy corn. They come in to get the grain. They decide that before they go talk to the Pharaoh, before they go buy the grain, they go to look for Joseph. They want to see, they're going to find out, is he dead? And if he isn't dead, let us buy him back and return him to our father. That is their first thought. We know he was sold into Egypt, but they don't expect him to be the ruler of Egypt, Pharaoh's second-hand man. So they go to like the brothels and the poor areas of town. They don't find him, and they conclude that he's dead. I like that, and I think it probably did happen. Judah did not crush a rock with his butt, but it is likely that the brothers did look for Joseph. And so, again, when we look at the apocryphal sources, we have the four basic categories. 2 that we can believe, 2 that we should reject. 1 we believe outright because it agrees, anything that agrees with the scriptures we know is true. Those things that don't directly agree with the scriptures but don't contradict the scriptures, we continuously say, yes, these likely happened. Some of them, maybe not, but there's a good chance. Then there are those that are a direct contradiction of the scriptures. We reject those completely. And then there are those that don't directly contradict the scriptures, but they don't agree with them, but the story they tell is so ridiculous that the odds are it's not true. Those ones we should reject tentatively. We should say, most likely, this didn't happen. Possibly, probably not. These other ones, probably, possibly not. These ones definitely not. Whenever we're reading any apocryphal source, those should be how we judge what that source is saying. And if we keep this in mind, and we keep the Spirit with us, we will know the good in these apocryphal sources. I'm going to leave that here.